Hey everybody, welcome back to Vanta EDC. Today I'm going to be reviewing this knife, which is the Vosteed Labrador. And yeah, it's a folding liner lock knife. It has a 3.74 inch blade. The handle is 4.99 inches, basically 5 inches long, and the knife overall weighs 3.44 ounces. Blade steel is 154 cm, has a high flat grind. I think it's a satin finish. It has these multiple deployment methods that I'll talk about more later, and micarta scales on my version in particular. Now, normally this is the part where I say why I got a knife, but this is a knife that I did not go getting for myself, but was given to me. If you saw my initial impressions of this knife, this was sent to me by Vosteed. They reached out to me over social media asking if I was interested in reviewing this knife, and I said, sure, under the really the only condition that they not, I guess in a way, have any influence on my review, that I didn't have to censor myself, they didn't give me any talking points, all that. To me, bottom line, with any, I guess, with this channel, I have no desire to be a puppet for any company. I want to be able to, speak my mind and share my own opinions based off of my experience and my preferences and whatnot. And so, yeah, to me, it's really important that I be able to say what I want about these knives, especially, yeah. So, yeah, basically, I was like, yeah, I'll review it as long as you let me say what I want. And they were like, yep, that's totally fine. And so I'm glad that worked out. And this is mine to keep. I asked them, I confirmed with them. They said, yeah, you can keep it. So we'll get more into that later. But my overall experience with this is my first Vosteed that I've ever owned. I did very briefly handle a raccoon, I believe it was. A guy at my local knife store, he had one. I didn't really get to handle it in any significant way, so basically this is my first Vosteed that I've ever handled, let's just put it that way. And so I've heard, kind of heard good things. I think I'd maybe seen a review of like some of their other knives before, but really not super familiar with the brand overall. I think they might be like formed, or yeah, either the designs or the brand itself are formed by some fairly well established makers. But again, this is really based off no research. So, if you know more about Vosteed, feel free to put that in the comments. I'd love to learn more. So it was a pleasant surprise because in a way I just didn't have any expectations. It wasn't a knife that I had done any research on prior to. It wasn't something that I was aware of really before they reached out to me. So in a way, I kind of like that. I like walking in with a blank slate. Like for kind of a similar examples, like with movies, if I know I'm gonna watch it, I don't want to watch the trailers. I don't want to hear reviews. I don't want to even hear people's overall impressions. I just like walking in with a blank slate. So that worked out for this knife in particular, and I think that ended up working out in my favor, because I really enjoy a lot about this knife. So I said I'm going to be honest with this, but just be forewarned. I have a lot of good things to say. You may not like to hear that if you feel like I'm going to be a shill, but I'm not going to be a shill. I have no vested interest in maintaining my relationship with Vosteed. So, yeah. That's not to say I don't want to maintain my relationship with Vosteed. It's just there's no stakes for me. So, yeah. Anyway, this is back to my just overall experience. It's funny, I guess maybe in part because I had no expectations for it before getting it. But this ended up being a knife that I found myself wanting to fidget with even more than like my Mordax sometimes. Oh, jeez. Just deployed that into my hand. Thankfully not the sharp point, just the spine. But yeah, like even though I think the Mordax is a very fidgety knife and I enjoy handling it, I found myself wanting to fidget with this a lot more, and I'll explain more why, and it'll be clear soon why. So yeah, and overall it's a very comfortable knife, I would say, especially for a large knife. It's very comfortable to grip in the standard, do you call it saber grip? I don't know what there's other than standard grip, and then choked up on the choil here. It's very comfortable there. So yeah. So now we're going to get into like the small details and the things that I like about this knife, which again, there's going to be a lot. So buckle in. So the first thing, which I had no expectation, and I just didn't know anything about, so I wasn't expecting it beforehand. But this action is, you see that? it's a guillotine basically, almost. It's not like, it's not swinging down super fast, but it's swinging down, especially, so like for perspective, obviously this is top down, so I can't really show it like at this profile because there's no gravity helping it. But when you let gravity help it, it basically brings it 90%, like 90%, 90 to 95% of the way, or all the way like that. So this action is really satisfying. It's very smooth, and as you can see, it drops shut. So I think part of that, the smoothness, is just, it really is satisfying. I don't have many liner locks and frame locks, and I definitely don't have ones with this sort of action. So to have a knife with this sort of action is really satisfying, and so I can see why people like things like the Arius, or I don't know what other knives are, really well known to drop shut. But anyway, it's definitely making me think about getting a knife that I really like that will drop shut like that. But yeah, so it has great action, very satisfying. Now, kind of in a way, kind of the inverse of that, so many deployment methods, which is what contributes to how fidgety this knife is. So as you can see, there is a flipper, a front flipper, and thumb studs on both sides. So you can light switch it, you can push button it, you can thumb flick it, can reverse flick it, and this is the knife where I learned how to front flip it. There we go. So far I have not been able to do this front flick smoothly at all with the side of my index finger. So maybe those who are more experienced with front flippers could do it with this one. I think it's possible. It's just I'm not great at it. The jimping on here is also kind of not the most tacky. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it's super fidgety, partially because it has so many deployment methods. It is not messing around in that regard. So yeah, the next thing I really like about this knife is the blade. It's a long blade, so I don't love how long it is, but what I do love is how high the flat grind is. Like, I love, see how the blade flat is just barely there, and then it actually tapers off. And so it basically becomes a full flat grind about 50% of the way down, right about starting here. So and on top of that, the finish on it, I believe it's like some sort of factory satin, but it doesn't look like the typical belt satin that you'll see on a lot of other knives. I think this satin, maybe it's a hand satin, maybe it's a belt satin. I actually don't know how to discern that, but either way, I think it looks really good. You get this, as you can see how reflective it is. That's my phone right there in the reflection. It's not like a mirror, but it's definitely very reflective. So yeah, I think it's a really handsome blade. Yeah. Next thing I like, if you've watched a lot of my reviews, I like having finger choils, especially on larger blades. So having this forward finger choil on the blade is nice because you can choke up and make the knife feel smaller when you need it to feel smaller. So that's a really nice feature as well. Now the scales, one thing that I think realized today, actually, as I was preparing to record this, was that realizing these scales are contoured, which contributes to a really comfortable feel in hand. It feels really organic. There's no really hard edges, I would say, other than maybe if you, with your index finger on the actual liner lock, the serrations of the liner right there. So yeah, it's a very comfortable in hand, in large part because of the contour of the scales, as well as the overall cut, the shape, the profile of the scales. So yeah, another thing, the aesthetic on the pivot is really great. So it's kind of hard to tell, but basically what you have here is this kind of like tri-winged pivot with these cutouts here, and then it's got this bronze collar. So I mean, for a knife this cheap, quote unquote, it's less than $90. I think it's like $87 or something like that. It's got a really good looking pivot. I'm glad that they put the time, like that's aesthetic, and a lot of people would argue that's secondary, but when we're enthusiasts, having a unique and well-designed pivot can be actually contribute a lot to how much we appreciate or don't appreciate a design. And I really appreciate this aspect of the design. They even do it on the non-show side where the Torx head is, and I like that they don't have I don't know actually if this is what do you call it, a not lock pivot, but a free spinning pivot or not, but because I haven't disassembled this, I don't plan on disassembling it. But yeah, it's a great looking pivot. And then Next thing that I really like is this clip. It is super low profile. Now there's one downside to that, but I'll get to that later. But overall, especially primarily when you have it in hand, it's like you barely feel it there. It's like almost invisible in a way. And for me, it fits almost perfectly in the bend of my I guess my pinky and my ring finger, well, my right side ring finger, whatever, fourth finger, when I'm gripping it in the standard grip here. So it really is not obtrusive. It's not uncomfortable, which is great. No real hot spots there. Now also one great thing about the clip that a lot of more expensive knives don't do sometimes is that the clip interface is inset into the scales here, so it doesn't create additional protrusion, and then the screws themselves are flat headed and also flush with the clip, so you shouldn't get any added obstruction when you're sliding this into your pocket or pulling it out. Now, the liners, just a quick note, these liners are skeletonized. You can see those holes are there, and then there's like one hole right there, but the rest of it is the liner lock, so can't really skeletonize that, I guess. But yeah, it's skeletonized, I'm assuming, primarily to cut down on the weight, which is great, because the fact that this knife is 3.44 ounces with a 3.74 inch blade is pretty impressive to me. So yeah, the last thing I'll say, small detail that I like, is just the branding is there, but it's subtle. So it's just along, I don't know if this is considered the flat of the blade, but right here at the base. And then you have the model name here and the blade steel there. I like that they confine it to this, like really close to the handle and not out on any part of the primary bevel, high up here. And this, it's not gigantic. There's no big logo. It's just the brand name there. So I like that. And then even on the clip, I do like that they have the logo here, but it's small, right? I would say, I guess it's all subjective, but I feel like just the way it's done and the design of that logo there is pretty good. So, yeah. Now, there are a lot of good things. There are things I would change if I had my way, things that I don't love about this. So this is the part where, I'm going to be honest. I was honest about the good things, but also honest about the bad things now. So the main thing is, and this is a personal preference thing, is the size. This is a big old knife. The next biggest folding knife I own is my Mordax. And so if we compare them side by side, the Mordax, I believe, has like a 3.5 inch blade, which I don't believe when I compare, like, at least the way that they measure it. Maybe that's the discrepancy, but it almost looks the exact same. But the handle is significantly shorter. And so for me, this is about as big as I would want a folding knife, because in the standard grip, you can see that I still have a lot of room I can spread out to. And I don't need any more room than that. And then especially when I choke up, I definitely don't need more room. So this is about as big as I'd want a knife. So this definitely exceeds that. But, that's a personal preference thing. It's not an innate, bad thing about the design. I think one practical implication of having such a large knife is it is really large in pocket. I'm not used to personally carrying knives this long and large. So, if you are, more power to you, but this is just not for me in that regard. Now, I mentioned the things I liked about the clip, but the one thing I dislike about the clip is actually how low this bill goes. It's really hard to slip it over your pocket because it doesn't really give you much room to work with when you're trying to push it to clip it on. So, I know that if you increase the bill, it can increase the chances of it creating a hot spot. So maybe that was just an intentional give and take by the designers, in which case I understand. I just personally would prefer it to be a little bit higher, just to make it easier, I have noticed when I've carried this before that it does make it, I do have to be a little more intentional and thoughtful towards when I'm actually trying to reinsert it into my pocket and make sure the clip catches. So, yeah. Next thing I would change is the spine jimping. It's there. It's really mainly for I guess, like if you're here, like this low on the knife, then you can use it, but it's really just not very grippy. It's the grooves are not very deep, and it's kind of tightly, each groove is there kind of, there's a density to them such that you really just aren't getting a ton of grip there. It's really easy for me to slide up and down on it. So it's better than not having anything, but it's definitely not the best jimping that I've used before. So it could be improved in that regard. Now, one thing that's, again, this more aesthetic and maybe a preference thing, but just something that I thought I'd point out is if you just look at the knife from this up, that looks weird, right? There's so many protruding things, right? So there's the flipper, and then there's the front flipper, which kind of looks like I don't know, like the head bill of a chicken or something, like a rooster or something like that. And then there's the thumb stud, right? Now, that could be subjective. I don't know how many people would relate with not loving the aesthetic of this, but me personally, it kind of just looks a little funny. Thankfully, when you have it deployed, it doesn't look nearly as weird because the front flipper's hidden, and then the main flipper is here and only protrudes a little bit, and thumb stud. So, if you're used to knives, it is what it is. But yeah, it just kind of looks a little weird, honestly, because of it has so many deployment methods and the way that they decided to implement them. So take that for what you will. Another thing I would change is where the flipper is located. When I want to front flip this, it's very natural for me to want to bring my index finger farther up the knife. So I have to very consciously keep my hands down. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, see that? The flipper runs into my index finger when I'm trying to front flip. So I don't know if they thought through that when they designed it, and if that was intentional or not. Obviously it'd be harder to get a lot of leverage if they lowered this flipper further down the blade. So maybe this was just the way it had to be in order to have a flipper. Maybe that was the priority, is just having a flipper to begin with. But yeah, it's just harder. You have a greater chance, if you're not paying attention, to just kind of, at the very least, catch, if not fully stop the knife, because the flipper interfaces with your index finger there. So keep that in mind if you're considering buying this, or if you have one. Yeah. The last few things that I would change: texture of the micarta is not super tacky. It's not like perfectly smooth. It's not like laminated over, thankfully, but it's also not as grippy as I would personally like. Now, that said, the only other micarta knife I've owned was the tactile Maverick, which I've sold. Which I think that was Richlight micarta, so it almost feels more like G10. I've heard people describe it being more like G10 than micarta, traditional micarta. So yeah, anyway, all that to say, I don't have much experience with micarta, but I don't love the texture of this micarta in particular. Like, I like grippier stuff, basically. So yeah. The very last thing, the clip location, which I'm actually kind of torn on this. So the clip location, as you can see, is not a full deep carry. If it was full deep carry, then it would go all the way up here. Now, the more I think about it, I think that could be a good thing, because this handle is freaking 5 inches long. Having a deep carry means you have to have really deep pockets in order to make sure this isn't being like bumped out of your pocket by bottoming out on your pocket before it hits the max, the depth of the clip. So, depending on, maybe how big your pockets are or whatever, wherever you are putting this knife, maybe the location of the clip is fine. But, for people that are sticklers about having a deep carry clip, this is not a deep carry clip. So that is what it is. Now, some just other observations for people that might be interested or, concerned about this sort of thing. I noticed that the balance is really perfect. I get it right here. So notice I can just immediately turn it here. So I would say, and then when I let go, it's just the perfect balance point as far as I can say, just when you're having in the standard grip here. So it's got good balance there. The lock bar access is pretty solid. See the cutout here, and it's nice that there's extra sloping here into the cutout, so it's really not hard to get to the lock bar and disengage it from the knife. And so yeah, the lock bar access is good. And then notice that there is this lanyard hole placement here, right there. So some people care, some people don't. That's where it is. Another thing is, this is fairly strong, but it does have some give if you're really bearing down on it. So I think it's fairly strong, and the lockup on this is rock solid. After a lot of fidgeting, it's still not budging at all. So I think that's a good thing. So overall opinions, I think this is a very thoughtful design, and it's very well executed. I think it's a great value. Again, it's under $90 on the Vosteed website. I'm sure there's places that probably sell it for maybe even a little less. So I think this is a great value, because you get a lot of features that, I think, especially just the way it's executed. The fact that it's, the detent is well tuned. It's got this drop shut action. It's got this really good blade finish. It's got this, these collar detail, pivot details and whatnot. I think it's got a lot of features that, individually would add a lot to a knife. And so to get this for under $100, I think is a pretty good value personally. So if you're a person who likes big knives, likes a fidgety knife, it likes a drop shut knife, this is great for all those things. If you have big hands, it's definitely, I can imagine it's because for me, like I have medium-sized hands and I'm able to grip this far up without choking up and have this much left over. And when I'm choked up, look how much space I have. So, if you have big hands, this could be a great knife. I wish if they had sent me, I should say this, I would be keeping this if this was in some sort of black. If the handles were just like, they have a version with black micarta and the satin finish, if they sent me that, I probably wouldn't give this away because I like this knife a lot, but it's not in black, so I can't hold on to it. So that said, my plan is to actually give this away when I hit 1,000 subs. Now, I don't ever in my videos ask people to like, subscribe, hit the bell, blah, notification, blah, 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 whatever, all this self-promotional stuff. Not that that's wrong. It's just, I don't like being self-promotional, so I just kind of avoid it. But if you're interested in possibly winning this knife, this exact one, and you're not already subscribed, get subscribed, because that'll get us closer to the 1,000 sub benchmark, or whatever you want to call that. And then I will figure out a way to give this away to one of my subscribers. So yeah, this is one that I'm going to keep tucked away until then. I don't plan on really heavily using it, or maybe even using it at all. I can't guarantee that, but I don't plan on heavily using it between now and when I give it away. I did use it some to cut through some cardboard and paper, and it did a great job. So I think whoever gets this should be happy, especially if it's free, right? So it's free to me, free to you. It's a great knife. So, I'm hopeful that, hopefully Vosteed is happy with this review. Hopefully they're willing to keep sending me knives to review. If not, no big deal. But I really want to try, given how well designed this is, how well made it is, how much value you get for it, I'd love to try other Vosteed designs. I'm really especially interested in their Valkyrie, which is one of their button lock designs. I think that might be the design for me from their brand in particular. So we'll see if they're willing to make that happen. If not, no big deal. I might actually buy one for myself anyway. I've seen some good reviews on it. So yeah, hope you found this helpful. If you've used this knife, feel free to, input your own experience with it. If you have questions about this one, feel free to throw it in comments. I should be able to answer. But yeah, until next time, take care.